First off, I want to thank the brave men and women who work behind the wall. I want to thank them on a national level because their job goes unrecognized.
How do they try to turn a guard?
Well, correctional officer. Sorry, I apologize. But correctional officer. How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi, host of Tier Talk. Great question came my way today. Gangi, as a frontline officer, what would you expect from your supervisor? And I think that's a great question. So we're talking about that immediate level. We're talking about the supervisor that frontline officer directly reports to. Some will call him a sergeant or her a sergeant, but that's not always the case in other facilities. So I'm just going to generalize it by saying your immediate frontline supervisor. So I'm going to give it a shot. Also, Russ Hamilton is also going to answer the question. Now, I have not seen Russ's video. Russ has not seen mine. But me and him are pretty good independent thinkers. So maybe there'll be some part that's may run parallel, but I think for the most part we may have a different perspective, but I think that perspective is going to complement each other. So I'm just going to give it a shot this way and then see what comes out of it, if you will. Hopefully it's not something too repetitive, but again, me and Russ have a very unique mindset, so I'm assuming there's going to be a little bit of a difference as to what we expect or how we express it. So when we come back from our sponsor, we're going to be discussing what I would expect and what Russ would expect from a frontline supervisor as an officer. Now, guys, if you haven't, the show Tier Talks for you brave men and women at work and correction, so please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. The bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. And guys, when you get a chance, please check out that YouTube channel, Guardian RFID. They post some of my content there. I believe they just posted a video today on feelings of obligation, basically never be obligated to an inmate. So I'll post a link to that video in this description. And I think it's a video you'll enjoy. It's content that I do specifically for them. And again, we're gonna go to our sponsor. When you come back, we'll discuss what I would expect from a supervisor if I was an officer. I stand by for our sponsor.
I wanted to attend a university that had an intelligence program. I wanted to look at problems different. I wanted to increase my critical thinking abilities. AMU offered those avenues to expand. Obtaining your degree as an adult, you're actually paying yourself and investing in yourself. You can't put a dollar on it, it's priceless. It's something that can never be taken away from you.
American Military University. Learn from the leader.
Thank you guys for listening to our sponsor. So it's a great question. What would I expect from my supervisor if I was a frontline officer? Now, I remember as an officer what I would expect. I remember that. I'm not really far removed from the front line. I still hold on to my roots. And when I became a supervisor myself, I remembered what my needs were. And I like to feel that because of me knowing my roots and remembering my roots, I was a good supervisor. Because again, whatever those concerns were that the front line has, I probably had those same concerns. So one thing, which is pretty easy, don't forget where you came from. Don't forget the roots, the foundation, what made you who you are. You know, you don't want to stray too far from that. Trust and believe. Because I think when you remember your roots, it gives you an understanding of that frontline perspective. It makes you empathetic, and that's okay. You can be empathetic as a supervisor. You know, so knowing those frontline roots, remembering those frontline roots, that's going to help you really get a good relationship with your front line because it gives you an understanding of that perspective. Plus, another thing, guys, is you don't want a supervisor that isolates themselves from the front line. You don't want that either. You need to have that partnership. You need that teamwork really does matter, that teamwork mentality. You know, when I was a supervisor, I took full responsibility of my team. So, you know, through the good and the bad. It's hard for supervisors to stand by their team when the team makes a foolish mistake, but that's what a supervisor should do. That's what leaders do. They take responsibility and or accountability. It's not doing it in isolation, which means that if I have to discipline this employee, I can't really separate myself too much from that discipline because that employee is a reflection of the team. And I'm part of that team. But again, when you have a success, let's share it. It's great to have that success. So it's not me, the team leader. It's all of us together working as one. So I don't want a supervisor that feels separated from the front line to the point where they're isolated and they do things in an isolated fashion. I don't want that. I also want a supervisor, and I guess this is in line with what I just said about the isolation, but a supervisor that's willing to stand up for their people, that's willing to speak their concerns. I do. I want that. You know, because sometimes that supervisor is the only person that has that connection to that next level of management. So it's like taking the information, filtering it down, but yes, bringing it up to the next level of management to see if those concerns could be addressed. And you need a supervisor that's a good communicator too, to make sure that they're able to communicate those concerns. But again, they have to listen. I think a key thing about being a good communicator is you're also a good listener, because you're able to hear what's needed and then go ahead and express it. So on top of that, then we also need to have a supervisor that's a good communicator. I have to be able to understand what you expect from me. And you should be able to understand what we should expect from you, both ways. And that pretty much only happens through effective communication. So you do need a supervisor that knows how to communicate, that knows how to give directives, but also understands what's needed and be able to explain that to their staff. Sometimes staff can be resistant when no one tells them the why of something happening. So if we have to make a change, sometimes staff will be okay with the change as long as someone explains to them the why. Most of the time, some people feel, well, we don't have to explain that, just deal with the change. Yeah, but why can't you explain it to them? I think that opens up a dialogue, because people will want to work more if they understand the why of it happening. I don't see anything wrong with someone saying, hey, we had to do these changes and this is why we had to do these changes. I think that better understanding will provide you with a force that's willing to work and accommodate those changes, as opposed to them wanting to be resistant because they don't understand why that change is happening. And I really do think that's key, and that can only come across through effective communication. I'm trying to think if there's another area I can touch, because there's so many things you can go with. But remember, I didn't see Russ's video, so I don't want to jump into something that he may say and then we get it off twice. But it's still good to understand, the other perspective too, because sometimes we can have the same topic but we cover it a different way. But I'll give one more thing, and this is not a catch-all, by the way. There's a lot more that we can add to it, and that's what you guys can do in the comments. But I do want a supervisor that cares for his people. I want a supervisor that knows how to read the temperature of his people, know what's happening, and be able to help with that employee morale. Basically, if there's a good moment, we recognize it. If there's a bad moment, we share in that. Make sure that Frontline's not the only one facing that burden. And I think it's great when Frontline can see that they have a supervisor that cares, because hopefully that level of care moves up and up and up the chain. So again, it all starts with that Frontline supervisor. But again, these are just some thoughts. We'll see what Russ has, and then obviously you guys in the community can comment, compliment, and we can pretty much just get a very good dialogue based on what we feel, what we would expect from a Frontline supervisor. But what do you got, Russ?
Hey there, Tier Top fans. Russ Hamilton here from Keepers of Chaos. So Anthony Gangi asked me to address a specific issue today, and that issue is, what do we or you or I or any specific individual that's caught up in this great profession of corrections want or need from their supervisor? So, I really started, just trying to think that thing out and to try and, come up with a few quick little, points on the whole matter. And the thing that, really struck me as the most immediate, the most important thing that I needed from a supervisor during my career was direction. I needed a goal to get to, and I needed, a path to get there. So, the goal is kind of like the strategy, the overall arching thing that we're looking at each day, which, if you want to go from a general viewpoint, that end goal is always going to be safety. But what do we do to get there? We do things like, interdiction of contraband, we do searches, we do intelligence, we try and, disrupt the security threat groups as we can do them. And so what a good supervisor does is he sees what the goal is, that safety or, these other sub goals that are set aside alongside that and the tactics that you need to get there. And he tells you what he expects. He fills you in on, what we need to do for that shift, or for, that week, for that month to try and meet what our end goals are. So, having said all that, there was quite a few different times in my career where maybe I had some supervisors that weren't quite that gung-ho. And so kind of one of the things that I needed then from that sort of supervisor was to go ahead and let me take charge. Let me go in there and figure out what's needed. Let me be your guy. Let me be, the one that's going to, help you achieve what your goals are. And maybe, teach you from the next rung down, as it were. And so, sometimes you're going to be in that position where you're going to need to approach that supervisor and give him the ideas that you've had. Maybe he hasn't been in the business that long. Maybe you have a lot more experience. Maybe what you need to do is bring them along a little bit. But whichever way it's accomplished, those are the things you need. Now, if you're the supervisor, looking down on your subordinates here, what you want to do is you want to come up with a plan. You want to come up with a plan that's going to enthuse them and that they're going to want to take that direction. Because, there's a lot of, negative Nancy's out there in corrections. And we don't want to let that be the be all end all. You can have, one bad apple spoil your whole bunch. So, create these goals for them and design little operations for them. We're going to go in and we're going to do a raid on this dorm, or we're going to do a simultaneous raid on these 3 different cells. And the reason is, I've got my one individual that I've assigned to, coordinate and hold most of the intel that we're doing. And I have another officer over here, he's really good at designing the searches or launching them in a tactical perspective. Get people involved, get people invested, and, it's a 2-way street, you've really got to, have the right personnel or train the right personnel. And then, those right personnel that are, looking up at you from below, that, they should be, trying to make you successful. They should be trying to find ways to follow your directions or give you better goals or better tactics and stuff. So it's not just from one perspective. There's 2 perspectives. There's the up ladder and the down ladder. And hopefully if you're a good supervisor, you can spark that to the best of your advantage to be able to, mold, those people below you to be better. And if you're one of those people below and that supervisor really isn't sparking too much, maybe you can be the one to, help them along, or to at least, carry some of the load and try and not let things get out of hand where you're not impacting the security on a day-to-day basis. And that's just what I've seen. Some supervisors, they just don't have that spark. So anyway, that's my 2 cents worth. Anthony, I hope you like this video. I hope everyone gets something out of it. And this is Russ Hamilton. I'm signing out.
Hey guys, one more thing, a little bit of a bonus footage here. So I'm going to do this in black and white. 1, 2, 3. Boop. Black and white. Hey guys, real quick. I also like supervisors that look to transform their employees into future leaders. Me and Michael Pataro had this discussion a while back. It's called transformational leadership. You want to give your employees discretion. You want to give them power to make decisions, because the last thing we want in this profession is a hesitant force. We need people that are able to adapt and adjust. And I do not want supervisors who limit the potential of our employees by literally going for that discipline every time they make a decision. We do not want that. And me as a front line, I want to feel effective. So I'm not going to be able to feel effective if I have a supervisor that questions everything I do, that looks to micromanage me as opposed to kind of letting me fly a little bit. Sometimes we're going to make mistakes, but mistakes are a great way to learn too. So we have to be able to find a way to balance that and be careful with what we jump to discipline on. All I'm asking for is that when an employee makes a decision and the supervisor may have a question about that decision, ask them. get their perspective, get an understanding, and then go from there. We don't want a force that does not want to move. We don't want a force that's frozen. So again, I would like a supervisor that looks to empower their employee and looks to give them knowledge so they can learn, and just basically looks to get them to become future leaders. Like, what would you do if I wasn't here? Thanks for listening to the bonus footage.